Hi and welcome back to my channel. In this video you have my September week 2 vlog. I'm coming to you on Wednesday and these weeks for September start on Sunday. No, I didn't delay. I just didn't finish a book until now. So yes, this week has actually been a lot slower than the previous weeks have, mainly because of the length of the books that I've been reading. The book that I'm reading physically, although technically on ebook, is Blood Over Brighthaven, and I am really enjoying that. I'm having to make myself read more, not because I don't want to, but because I'm out of the habit. But when I am reading, really enjoying it and wanting to read longer, and I'm just running out of time. The audiobook that I finished is Sky on Fire by Jenn Lyons. I loved this. The prompt for this, I don't remember the class, but the prompt was a 5-star prediction. So I chose this one because her debut series, Rune of Kings, The Course of Dragons, Rune of Kings, this book 1, all-time favorite series. All while reading this, I kept asking myself, is it 5-star material? Have we gotten there yet? Do I have that magic hook that I was talking about in, I think, my August wrap-up to make it more than just a 4.5 stars? Wait just a moment for that. I'm still not 100% certain. I haven't put it through Cawpile. I finished it a little bit earlier today. So this book is set up in a different world than the Course of Dragons series. One thing that Jenn Lyons knows how to do is create a beautifully complex, fully realized world. Her world building is unmatched. I want so much more in this world. I don't know if we'll get it or not, but what she has here is too good to just use for one book. We need more in this world. And yes, the Course of Dragons series had dragons in it. Those were less typical dragons. You have to read the series to know what I mean by that. These dragons are typical dragons and what you think of, but they are so complex. I loved that. So in this book, the main character, Anna Rod, is basically on the run. She, long story short, made a dragon mad, the dragon who is not necessarily the highest dragon by rank, but is ruling as regent in the stead of the dragon who is the highest dragon, because that one is asleep. It's complicated, I know. It's a Jenn Lyons book. But she made that other dragon mad. As a result, was executed. The only thing about that is she wasn't actually executed. Well, she was. Everyone thought she was dead, but she survived the execution. And now she's being hunted. And at first you think it's going to be really bad for her if she is captured by these other dragon riders that are hunting her, because the dragon riders are all connected and serve that one dragon who she made mad and ordered her execution years ago. That's just one aspect of it. I could keep going with how intricate the plot goes, but that's just Jenn Lyons and how she writes. The more that I'm talking about this book, the more that I am realizing this is a 5-star. For once, I have a 5-star prediction that turns out to be a 5-star, and I'm so glad I did this one instead of the Fredrik Backman book I talked about last week. The world building being unmatched, along with the complicated, intricate plot. It's nowhere near as complicated and intricate as the Course of Dragons series, because that's an entire series. She clearly had it planned out, knew where she was going, dropped Easter eggs all along the way in multiple books. I cannot wait to reread those. I don't know when, but I really do want to reread them, knowing what I know about certain things. This is a standalone. I wish it was a series. I wish she would give us so much more in this world. It's still well done. You've got all these different people becoming involved for various reasons. The one thing that I wanted just a little bit more of in this book is a little bit more character depth. She had fully realized characters here, but some of the motivations behind their actions and the development of relationships, I wanted to see more. Because we were limited to just one book, and she has such a large cast that's typical of what Jenn Lyons does, the depth that I would have absolutely loved is not quite there. It's not saying that her characters are flat. I just wanted more. I wanted to learn more about these characters explore more of their stories, of their motivations, of how they interact in this world. I was thinking before I came on to do this update, this review, that I was going to give it a very high 4.5 stars. After giving this review, I have talked myself into a 5-star. There is no way that I can give this anything less than a 5-star. I loved it that much. I was captivated the entire time from beginning to end. This was a very long audiobook. It doesn't look very long. I mean, just look at the sprayed edges. I'm so glad this was an Inkstone book. I think this was Inkstone. Yes, this was an Inkstone book. And Jenn Lyons is very quickly becoming one of my favorite authors. I love the world that she creates. I don't know how many books ultimately I will finish, because the book that I picked up next, because I'm trying to prioritize the books that are officially for my classes, I have 2 other books on that official list that I have as audiobooks. The others I have to read physically. So the book that I picked up next is Poison Song by Jenn Williams. Yes, 2 books by 2 authors who have the same first name as me. Didn't plan that. But I happen to love both of those books/series. So maybe there's something about my name that means it's a book that I love. Just kidding, of course. But Poison Song is a 23+ hour audiobook. It's a very long audiobook. At my listening speed, it takes it down to about 8.5 hours. I listen on about 2.7 times speed. So I think audiobook wise, I'm going to manage just 2 books this week. Maybe another one if I get some more listening time in Thursday, Friday, Saturday, because I have just 3 more days as far as the calendar week for what I'm doing for this. I really want to spend more time reading Blood Over Brighthaven. I do plan to finish that one. I might then be able to finish a few more of the books that I have physically, because I'm tempted to pick up One Piece. And that would be a much quicker read than Blood Over Brighthaven and any of these other books. We shall see where the week takes me. So I wasn't going to film an update for the vlog today, but we had an unexpected development. It's been raining this afternoon, and then I realized that the rain sounds I was hearing did not sound muffled like they should through a wall. So I came running into my library, and apparently one of our water lines is backed up and nobody told me. So when I ran a load of laundry, it backed up into the sink upstairs, overflowed, created a massive puddle, and leaked in my collectible books section. Thankfully, most of this space was already empty. I have, over here on the floor, spread out some of the books that just got a little bit of water on them. I had a stack of books that was right here. They're now in the trash because they were completely soaked. You can tell that the carpet is very wet. I've been debating for a while whether or not I was going to get rid of my Christian fiction section, but you can't fix water damage, so they're going. And I don't know how many of these, which are my classroom library challenge books, that I'm going to have to get rid of. But we shall see. Thankfully, none of the actual books that I really like and collect were damaged. But my library is going to be a bit of a mess for a little while. Okay, so I am back to wrap up the vlog. I have 2 more books to talk about. So that means I read just 3 books this week. That's a lot slower than my normal pace. However, all 3 of those books were 5 stars. I don't think I've had this amazing of a reading week ever. By quantity? No. Quality? After a month with no 5 stars, to get 3 5 stars in 1 week, and for that to be 4 or 5 stars overall, and the month is just half done. I've got a few other ones that I'm really excited about. Like I've got Obelisk Gate that I'm going to be getting to that I'm really excited about. So let's talk about those other 2. The reason that it took me the whole week to read 3 books is because they were all really long. I don't have a physical copy of one. I think it's going to be in a book box. I have to check on that. It's going to be traditionally published in October. So next month, coming up soon. And I'll start by talking about that one. And that is Blood Over Brighthaven. I loved this book. I knew I had a high chance of liking it. I knew I had a high chance of liking all of these books. This was read to fulfill the prompt of it was independently published but for being traditionally published. And so I got the art copy of it on NetGalley. I've read Sword of Kaigen before, which is one of the most well-known, independently published, most highly rated independently published books. And that was a 4.5 stars for me. So close to being a 5-star. So what made this book, Blood Over Brighthaven, a 5-star and Sword of Kaigen not? And I think it's the type of fantasy that it is. Sword of Kaigen is a martial fantasy. It was very well written. I loved the way that M.L. Wang was exploring the characters and everything that was going on in there. But martial fantasies don't have that it factor for me. Blood Over Brighthaven, academic fantasy, not dark academia. That's a whole different aesthetic. But this is a fantasy set in an academic world. And that is my bread and butter. I mean, just think back to Babel last year. So the main character in this world, in this story, Siona, she starts off the book by taking this exam that I think happens every year, but women get to sit for the exam only once every 10 years. And she is the one woman that is chosen. And she puts a lot of this pressure on herself because she's like, if I fail, then I'm feeding into their misguided interpretations that women are just useless. Obviously, the conceit of the book is that she makes it in. Siona is not a typical likable character. She doesn't necessarily see a lot of different social cues, a lot of different things that would elicit compassion from people. And she's a very no-nonsense, highly academic, maybe on the spectrum type of person. And she has to deal with all sorts of misogyny, but she's, again, directed against her. And the way that this is set up, she is part of a marginalized group. She's a woman, and in this world, they are highly marginalized. She is part of the privileged race. She's Tyrannish. And there's a whole group of people from places outside of the city that are called Quen. And there's a whole bunch of different tribes, but everyone in the ruling race basically lumps them all together, strips them of that identity. And even though she bucks the prevailing notion about women and knows that's not necessarily the case, she has had all of these ideas about the differences in races ingrained into her. And she ends up with an assistant who's not a typical assistant, because why give the woman a typical assistant who's actually going to help her? She ends up with the janitor, who is Quen. That's not his name, that's his quote-unquote race. He challenges her way of looking at things and holds her accountable to it, because at the same time, she has all these ideas ingrained into her from how she's lived, but she doesn't necessarily take them as fact. And she does things that are not considered societally acceptable, but she also doesn't realize the ramifications of what she's doing. Tomil, the other character, points those out to her, and she really bucks against that because it's pointing out flaws in her own character, in her own belief system. And that becomes a big thing that this book is dealing with, is exploring. I was interested as it was building, and then something happens about 40-ish% of the way through the book that flips everything on its head. And when that was revealed, obviously I'm not going to say what was revealed. When that was revealed, I went, this is going to be a 5-star book. Before that, I was thinking 4.5, 4.5. And then that thing gets revealed. Her entire world is rocked. It's unended, all upended, I should say. The foundation is completely torn away. And she has to deal with her relationship with her assistant, with Tomil. She has this idea that if she reveals this to everybody else, they're also going to be as horrified as she is by it. And Tomil's like, no, they're not. They're going to make excuses for it. They're going to make it fit their own worldview that they've grown up in. They're not going to want to acknowledge that. And she's still also struggling with what that means about what she's been doing for years, not knowing, and not necessarily wanting to take accountability. Well, not necessarily not take accountability. She struggles with what it means, because this thing that she loved, that she did for years, that she wanted to be the best at, she realizes that the reality of the consequences of what she's been doing have been horrific. And she's struggling with accepting the guilt and what that means for what she's been doing for years and her whole world. The way that it unfolds in the rest of the book, it's just this study into how this whole idea has been deeply ingrained into generations of these people in this city, this ruling class. How even when faced with the truth, they refuse to acknowledge it. They refuse to let that change their worldview. And instead, they use what happens, the consequences, the way that the people that they think is less than respond as a way of saying, see, what we believed about these people was always true. It is so well done. I cannot wait to get a copy of this book. Before I get to the other book that I finished, I was going to film another video yesterday or today, my third quarter unhaul, which I have a lot of books to talk about in that video. Unfortunately, my library is still currently a mess because of that inside rain that was happening with the backup pipe. There's a lot of books all over the floor. They're dry now. The carpet was pulled up, dried out. We have to put new padding down there. Well, not me. My stepdad's going to do it. I'm very thankful that I have a stepdad who specializes in residential construction and knows what to do with all of this. Very thankful. A lot of the books that are on the floor go on the shelf that's right above where he would be working. So I'm going to wait until that's done before I put the books back. So I'm not going to film that third quarter unhaul. There's going to be just one video this week. Totally fine. I forget why I was getting into that anyway. I guess just an update. That being said, technically I finished Blood Over Brighthaven after the Poison Song, but I finished them basically the same day. I finished this on the run, came home, you know, cleaned up after my run, and then read Blood Over Brighthaven. So I finished them practically the same day. And this is a very, very large book. This was basically the size of every book, all three books that I read this week. Poison Song finishes a trilogy. And this book is amazing. This trilogy is amazing. I think if I had to evaluate this book on its own, I mean, you couldn't really because it's so dependent on the previous books in the series. But I think this book on its own might have been a 4.5 stars. But the way that Jen Williams brings everything together in this series and ties up all of the story and things going on in this world is just so well done. The way that she builds the characters throughout these three books, and it's a lot of pages because all three books are practically this size. The one thing that I wished had been discussed more is something that Noon and Tor learn in The Bitter Twins. They go off to try to find something to try to get more help for everybody that's going on. And they learn something about the Eborans, about the history of the Eborans. The ramifications of that, how that makes Tor feel and have to deal with his own history being completely upended, that's talked about in here. But the actual reveals, the actual characters and actors that they meet in Bitter Twins, it's not really addressed again in this book. It's not addressed specifically. It's not really discussed. And perhaps that leaves the door open for further exploration. Where the Jurelia come from, the alien race, not really talked about in this. But that was okay. That was not wrapped up. I wanted a little bit more on that end, but I think it's okay that it's not wrapped up. The way that the character relationships in here are fully developed, the unraveling of certain characters, the way that certain things come into play, it's a real exploration of, I don't even know the word for it, but if you take Castilian, Tor's sister, who made some very interesting decisions at the end of the first book, throughout the second book you can see her mindset shift and change and become so warped. And where she is in this last book is not a place that you would expect her to be based on everything that's talked about from the first book on. And also her war beast, Celephon, how what was done to him so changed him, but yet his exploration, he's very childlike. His growth was so stunted. You saw a lot more of the growth in the various other war beasts in The Bitter Twins, but his growth really comes in this one. It's just, there's just so much that could be talked about. This is not traditional fantasy. There are some moments in here where Jen Williams leans into the creepy bug part, which you get a lot with the Aurelia, where I just, I was listening to that part and I'm just like, I don't like that at all. Very atmospheric, very well done. I think she did an excellent job with that. It really talks a lot about structure, upending the structure that we've always known, how to deal with that, the ramifications of that, what's going to happen afterwards for you guys. And then at the very end, when things that have always existed for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years are now done, what now? And the what now doesn't really get into, you don't really get into it in this book, which leads me to believe there's a possibility for more in this world. I don't know if Jen Williams plans on doing more in this world or not, but she definitely could. And it's just such a well-built world. And I think that's the biggest thing for all 3 books that I read this week. The world, I could imagine being there. The world building, absolutely phenomenal. That's a big thing for me in fantasy. And all 3 of these authors did an amazing job. And the other thing that I realized is that all 3 books are epic fantasy written by women. Jen Williams, Jen Lyons, M.L. Wong. I'm pretty impressed with the books that I got to read this week. Thanks so much for watching. I hope to see you in the next one.